Good morning, guys. Happy Monday. We have some interesting weather happening today. Um, we are going to be moving into reviewing fractions. So a few of these lessons are not going to be from our regular book. They're going to be from our iReady book, like what we were using at Teacher Table. So they're going to look a little different, but you guys have seen these pages before. I mean, not this exact page. I just meant pages from the book. We're going to start by reviewing equivalent fractions. So when we talk about equivalent, remember it has the root of the word equal in it, and equal means the same. So equivalent fractions are worth the same amount. It's like 1/2 and 2/4. We're always looking for something that is half the value. So here, when we're looking at 1/3, we have it as a mystery, something over something sixths. So the first thing I want to point out is when you guys open this page up in Seesaw, it's going to be little, especially the boxes. I went and I zoomed my page quite a bit. And I'm going to free write it in, but if you want to just write it next to it, so if you want to say whatever your equivalent fraction is next to 1 and 2 and so on, go for it. If you want to type them out, go for it. But you will have to make this page bigger. It is, the way that this book is made, there's a little bit less space between all the problems. So we're going to have to zoom. So let's talk about the trick that we were learning for equivalent fractions. So 1/3 is equal to something over sixths. What I do is I look at the relationship between the denominators, those are the numbers on the bottom, and I see this is a 6, and I see this is a 3, and I say, hey, I'm going to multiply this by 2. I'm going to multiply the top and bottom by 2. So when I do that, you write it as 2/2, because in fractions, what we do to the bottom, we must do to the top. So 2 times 3 is 6. 2 times 1 is 2. 1/3 is equal to 2/6. Let's go on to number 2. We have 2/3 is equal to something sixths. So again, I'm looking at the relationship between my denominators. 3 times 2 is 6. I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to write it in neatly enough. Ha! 3 times 2 is 6. And so I've multiplied the bottom by 2. I must multiply the top by 2. 2 times 2 is 4. Now, keep in mind, you have all the space off to the side. You can do it this way. You can do it that way. I'm trying to show you guys different ways to space out your work so that you're not feeling stressed out by trying to fit stuff into these boxes. Because we know that in person, these boxes are small. We've talked about that at Teacher Table. So just because we're on a computer doesn't mean it's going to be this big task for us to get everything to fit. Here, I'm just going to rewrite it and say, you know what, that's too small. I don't want to deal with that. And here, now I have lots of room. Boom, problem is solved. All right. We have 1 times something is a mystery. 2 times something is 6. Well, I know that 2 times 3 is 6. If I've multiplied the bottom by 3, I must multiply the top by 3. And 1 times 3 is 3. So the answer is 3/6. 1/2 is equal to 3/6. Remember, 3 is half of 6. So when you're looking for equivalent fractions to 1/2, you can always say, hey, what's half of this bottom number? Always search for half of the denominator. All right, now we're looking at 4/8. So I immediately noticed something about 4/8. We have a denominator of 8. We have a numerator of 4. We have 4 out of 8 pieces. 4 is half of 8. Therefore, 4/8 is one of those fractions, like 3/6, that is equivalent to 1/2. Now they've done something kind of tricky to us here. They've put the bigger number up front. So we have to figure out, by working backwards, how we can get from 2 to 8. The easiest way to solve these problems, just flip them around. Because they're equivalent, it doesn't matter if you have the big number up front or on the bottom. It is, up front or behind, not on the bottom. It is much easier to make things bigger than it is to go, well, 8 divided by something is 2. We're not super comfortable with our division yet, so flip it around. 2 times something makes 8. Well, we know that's 2 times 4. 2 times 4 is 8. So something times 4 made 4. That has to be 1 because it didn't change. 1/2 is equivalent to 4/8. On to problem number 5. 3/4 is equal to some eighths. We don't know how many eighths. Look at the relationship between your 3/4 and your something eighths. We know that 4 is multiplied by 2 to become 8. And if we multiply the bottom by 2, we must multiply the top by 2 because there's twice as many pieces. 8 is twice as big as 4. 3 times 2 is 6. 6/8 and 3/4 are equivalent fractions on the number line. All right, we've got one of those again. We're going to flip-flop it around. We have a missing denominator instead of a missing numerator. So that's kind of different today. We haven't seen that before. But that's okay because this isn't our first rodeo with fractions. We are already fraction experts. So, what can we multiply 2 by, or 1 by? Oh my gosh. Guys, I've made a terrible mistake. I am so sorry. I didn't want to flip this one around. What was I thinking? Bad advice. This would have been one of those moments in class where you guys are like, Miss H, what are you doing? The answer, I was just in my zone. And unfortunately, I was in the wrong zone. It was the error zone. Don't be me. Leave them alone. I was just dead set on flipping those numbers. I had a brain freeze on my part. I'm sorry, guys. Anywho, so we have 1/4 is equal to 2 over something. We don't know our something, but it doesn't matter because absolutely nothing has changed. So 1 times something makes 2. Well, that can only be 2. 1 times 2 becomes 2. If I multiply the top by 2, I have to multiply the bottom by 2. And 4 times 2 is 8. So here we have kind of like the little loop that we learned in class because I know we learned it as a little bit of a circle. I showed it really any old way on this because doing it on the computer is a little tough in terms of the way that we space this out. So as long as I see what you've multiplied by, I'm not worried about how you did it. You can even type it out and be like, hey, I'm going to multiply by 2. And then you just write your answer. That is totally fine. As long as I understand your thinking, that's all that matters. Okay, I'm going to have to do a little bit of erasing. And then we're going to have to come down to number 7 and 8. It says, draw a model to explain why your thinking, or why your answer, to problem 2 is true. So our answer to problem 2 was 4/6. 2/3 is equal to 4/6. I'm going to model this by drawing a number line. So here I have 2 lines, reasonably straight. They are about the same. 0, 1, 0, 1. Find your half. Okay, here's half. Whoa, I have a funky foot on that one. So I found my half, and then I went and I divided them in half. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. My 1/6 is a little too long, so I'm just going to shorten my line to keep them equivalent. minor correction right there. But we all have the eraser tool, which is super handy. So I'll shorten this just a little bit as well, since I initially made my line too long for what I wanted. 0 and 1, and here, so if these are 6, these are my thirds. So thirds, thirds. So this is, labeling these are going to be a little tricky. I recommend doing them sideways, because if we try to do them the way that these are vertically, we're going to run out of room fairly quickly. So here I'm labeling all my fractions on my number line. Here I'm going, my thirds are so much easier. The sixths were kind of hard because we had a lot of numbers there. And we know this is really 3/3. I forgot to label my ones. And this is really 6/6 because we have all the pieces when we're at one whole. All right, 2/3 is right here. And we have 4/6 right here. And as we can see, they line up perfectly on the number line. They are equivalent. They're just different size pieces, but together you have the same amount. All right. Draw a model to show why your answer to problem 4 is true. Let's look at problem 4. That was 4/8 is equal to 1/2. I'm going to write that over here because unfortunately for me, as I scroll, here, let me show you guys what happens. My 1 is going to travel with me. So that's not quite so awesome. So I will write that where we have a little bit more room and we can actually see everything. 4/8 equals 1/2. Again, I'm going to draw my number line. I'm going to try and draw them very large to make spacing them out a little bit better. If you want to draw these with squares instead of number lines, go for it. Remember, when we model with squares, they have to be exactly the same. All right, there's 1/2. That was pretty great. We love drawing 1/2 on a number line. It's the 4/8 that are going to be less fun. So remember, half, and then put your half in half. Now you have fourths. Now go and split all your fourths in half. Ta-da! You have 8s. Let's check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Count the blank spaces. Remember, we listened to the song, Count the Blank Spaces. All right, here we have 1/8, 2/8, 3/8. If you're getting really frustrated by labeling your number line, just tell me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Because I'll be able to count your spaces and say, yup, that is definitely 8 spaces, or I'll be like, hey, that is not 8 spaces, please fix this. So you can absolutely just label the spaces and not tell me how many 8ths they are, and just be like 5, 6. That's totally fine. You will not lose points. All right, so we said 4/8 is equal to 1/2, and boom, there we are. They are exactly equal.